I'm Curtis Harrington. I'm a film director, and I've made such films as Games and What's the Matter with Helen. And I was a great fan of James Whale from an early age, and I finally got to meet him. My friendship with James Whale, I think, came out of the fact that when I was very young, I became fascinated with horror films. One of my earliest memories is of seeing a huge poster, probably a billboard, of The Bride of Frankenstein. Now, at the time, I think I was probably too young even to read, but probably the picture of Elsa Lanchester and Karloff intrigued me so much that I begged my mother to let me see it. But of course, she, at that point in my life, said you are not allowed to see horror films. They're not suitable for children, so I didn't get to see it at that time. But later on, I managed to get to see a revival bill of Dracula and Frankenstein. I mean, Dracula and the Bride of Frankenstein, and that was my introduction to James Whale's work. And I fell in love with it, of course. And later on, when I was beginning college, when I was still a teenager, I can't remember exactly, but somebody introduced us because I said I was a great fan of his. I went to Europe, and he came over on a visit, not to visit me, but just he was traveling also, and he contacted me in Paris, and there's a lovely photograph of us together in Paris. He was very generous, very kind. He gave me some money, which I didn't ask for, to help me out because I was living from hand to mouth then. And then I went to London, and he came over to London, and I was able to arrange through the British Film Institute a showing of The Old Dark House, which already was a very rarely seen motion picture. And they did have a print at that time in London, and they got it out of the vault, and we had a special screening, and Jimmy was extremely pleased. I think it was probably the only honor of that kind that ever happened, because they just didn't have things like that in those days. Time went by, and I finally launched myself as a film director on my own, and I was put under contract by Universal Pictures. And my main goal, besides becoming a film director and making a film there, became saving The Old Dark House, because I knew that the film's rights had been resold to Columbia Pictures for a remake. And therefore, Universal at that time owned the film, but they didn't own the rights to show it. So that meant that it had no further commercial value to them. And I knew that it was just lying, the original negative and so on, was lying in a vault somewhere and probably beginning to decay. And so I made it a personal goal when I went to Universal to somehow save The Old Dark House. And how it came about was that I went to the head of the editorial department at Universal, and I said, can you find the negative of The Old Dark House? Well, it turned out that if it existed, it was at the vault in New York. So he did contact them, and he called me into his office. He said, Curtis, they can't find it. And I said, well, it's got to be there. I'm sure it's there. Please try again. The second time, word came back. No, can't find it, doesn't exist. Undaunted, I went back to him and I said, I don't believe it. It's got to exist. It has to be there. You must make more of an effort to get this film. So he did. And the third time, the word came back that they had found the original negative and a lavender protection print. They had analyzed the first reel, and it could not be printed. It was already decaying. So that meant that a new dupe negative had to be made of the first reel. Well, so far so good, except for the fact that Universal had no interest whatsoever in paying for this restoration of the film. So I got off letters to Eastman House, to the Museum of Modern Art Film Library, to the American Film Institute, saying that I had found the original materials and would they pay for having them restored, and that there was a problem with the first reel that couldn't be printed and all that. And I had fortunately met James Card, who was then the head of Eastman House in Rochester when I was in France. And he telephoned me immediately and said, Eastman House will pick up all the costs of making a new dupe negative, making prints, the whole thing. And then there was a long process where I had to get legal clearance from Columbia Pictures because they had done the remake. And it was understood that it would not, at that point at least, not have any further commercial release. And I got that clearance, and then it didn't just end there. Then the Universal people in New York said, well, we can't send this whole thing to Eastman House, so we'll have to send part of it at a time. So they sent the first reel of the lavender protection to be duplicated. And then after the weeks went by that the laboratory finally turned that out, then they sent that back to New York. Then the people in New York sent the original negative to be printed by Eastman House. And they made 3 prints. They made 4 prints. They made a print for themselves, print for the Museum of Modern Art Film Library, a print for the American Film Institute, and a print for the vault in Universal Pictures, where, as far as I know, it is right now. And that is the story of how I saved, and I really think I did, and I'm very proud of myself, the old dark house from oblivion.